While the moth-mounted knights were gone, word had reached the growing communal firesides of authorities in Pachanoi, seeking counsel with the riders of the sacred beasts. Their message reads, and I quote, "Friends of the North, good of intent and ever studious, we ask for your attention within our borders. Words of your case regarding flown-away refugees have reminded us of a recent occurrence here within our capital of Saguaro. We are eager to offer any service to your cause in return, as it is our belief these events are related, and may refer our attention to a neighbor led by malicious intent." End quote. This letter was swiftly delivered with love by carrier moth to Dumort of Ericales, while the Sarracennian knights were en route to the Kio border. As their moths followed the scent of the murder victims, fearful prejudices began to overtake the psyche of the knights. Reportedly, it was the charm and influence of Dumort of Ericales that assured the search for clues remained ongoing. After receiving the message from Pachanoi, Dumort insisted the knights fly out of sight of Kio and head to the confirmed second Fulgen and diptera carcass combination. The knights agreed, and they steered their beasts southeastward along the coast. It was around the time of this passage that events were happening on a lonely mountain in the northeast territories of the Kio faith. Largely unexplored and thus unsettled, Mount Zygote would create an entire class of study regarding a revolutionary display of taunting and a flailing contested battle for the pride of the many peoples of Sarracennia, not to mention the unrelenting religious conspiracy and myth-making throughout the eastern colonies that spawned thereafter. On a day of gentle rain, a lonely Kio explorer decided to engage her depression in battle by hiking deep beyond any confirmable path north of the easternmost boundaries of Kio Canyon. With madness on her mind and sadness in her epiderm, she scrawled on sheets of paper confessions of her desire to depart the world of the body by way of suicide. In one letter, she writes of her family that had descended from admiration into bitter poverty and disease. In another, she writes of the police inquisitors that had executed her husband for possessing sumac, a capital offense still enforced to this day. It is her final note on that day in the month of Prophetess in the year 731 that marks the tipping point, wherein the words contained a reaction to found evidence suggesting an attempted murder on a Fulgen citizen. Use Atonia writes in a tear-filled entry, quote, "No matter how the body sees me, if I am her daughter of light and of love, or if I am the daughter of her repulsion, I serve her with undying love for life. I say this and weep painful tears, but if the Kio order sees what I see now, then they too will know pain. My part is to care for this, a new friend, injured by a great fall but without anger in her spores. It will be both heretical to the Kio order, and yet simply good for me to aid this victim of their vile inquisition." End quote. Atonia's life has taken an almost instantaneous pivot when she discovers a dying young refugee of Fulgen descent, whose diptera had died of heat exhaustion and starvation. She offered the berries that grew from her shoulders to the Fulgen toadstool, who was able to express that her name was Telios, and the two new friends carefully made their way from the hilltop of their meeting and eastward towards Sarracennia. Atonia helped the Fulgen girl out of the saddle and shared what little water she had left. She offered the berries that grew from her shoulders to the Fulgen toadstool, who was able to express that her name was Telios, and the two new friends carefully made their way from the hilltop of their meeting and eastward towards Sarracennia. Atonia and Telios were found hiking southeast into Sarracennian borders. They were stopped by lawless Sarracennian highwaymen, who were quickly converted to their cause upon hearing the story of the flown-away refugees secured to the saddle of a diptera as a religious punishment by Kyo priests. The highwaymen were stunned and saddened by the tale, and agreed to escort the two into the care of a nearby board. Thus Atonia and Telios were welcomed along with the highwaymen into the centers of Ericales, a town of which the mayor, Dumort of Ericales, had founded alongside his siblings. The refugee Telios was given grand accommodations and time to heal from her dangerous and wild flight. Before long, Telios was ready to address those interested with her description of her religious expulsion from Kyo Canyon. She told them of the ritual of the Kyo Song of Parting that was performed after they were tightly secured to the saddles. The Sarracennians were horrified by this act approved by their Kyo neighbors. It was no secret that the power players within the Kyo High Order were attempting to stake claim within Sarracennia's mountain ranges by way of their missionary callings, though Dumort and his family generally considered the religious will of their people to be a choice all of their own, unhindered by the decisions of any overarching authority. It is also not a secret at this time in 731 that Kyo had been fortifying their position in a very paranoid and militaristic fashion, as had been noticed and recorded by observers within and around the faithful Canyon Empire. Dumort postulated on the ramifications of Telios' survival and decided to bring his thoughts to the forum. In an oft-recited chorus, Dumort asks the Fulgen refugee, and I quote, "What can we do for you, Telios? For you have defied the ruling of the Inquisition, and when placed in the hands of her body incarnate, she has delivered you to our safety, but foremost to the safety of the divine hills of that mount, the mount of your gracious Zygote that had been traveled by the Atonia, this brave and gracious pilgrim of Kyo descent. It is she that we have to thank for your safety and survival. What then does this mean, Telios of Marasmius and Atonia? The will of the Inquisition has been abandoned. In accordance to religious law, am I to understand that the Mount of Zygote rightfully belongs to you?" End quote. The question understandably sent shockwaves throughout the forum. Use became flush, her leaves quivering while she pondered, and the featureless countenance of Telios was said to have darkened with the implication. She never meant to get involved with power politics, and in fact had fled from an intensifying Marasmius, where religious differences had resulted in atrocities over land grabs and the collecting of religious spores that were protected by long-running family kingdoms. Telios kept silent, but Atonia responded, firm and passionate. It doesn't matter who the mount belongs to, but to say it belongs to the Fulgen will only result in its destruction. Were you to provide the force, the mount can be claimed by Sarracennia. If I am to know the political forces of my homeland, they won't halt until their roots expand into new soils. I am of the opinion that Sarracennia must secure the mount, diplomatically if possible. If the Kyo Inquisition react with malice, you must show them what makes you unique. And do not forget, Dumort of Ericales, that justice must be served for the family of Telios, for this atrocity alone has brought us together. End quote. From that point forward, everyone involved with the forum proudly announced themselves as Knights of Sarracennia. A very formal notice was sent to the abbot class of Kyo. The notice demanded their presence in a trial taking place at Mount Zygote, and since it wasn't referred to as this until the Sarracennians invented the term, they included a remarkable map so as to show which mountain they were referring to. The notice concluded saying that the representatives would be perched on the mountain's peak each night until the turning of the season, with the Kyo representatives simply required to confront the Sarracennian knight in order to guide them to the grotto wherein the trial would take place. As it were, no Kyo representative arrived before the turning of the season. This was satisfactory to all parties involved within Sarracennia, as Telios was able to connect with other Fulgen refugees living within the nearby hillside cities, as well as conversing and strengthening the community of Ericales. It had been confirmed that Telios would inspire the Fulgen bishops to cultivate their dark prayers in case of military conflict, of which everyone was certain was going to occur. And so, while Dumort and Eusatonia waited for a Kyo representative to come and explain themselves and their horrid actions regarding Fulgen refugees, the Knights of Sarracennia were strengthening their position and perfecting their techniques. Eusatonia and Telios quickly became intently involved with the planning of defensive positions alongside Dumort of Ericales and his court of generals. The defensive committee of Sarracennia knew their advantage as well. No one had any sort of air force in this early antiquity of civilized people across the body. They had debated on a tactic that involved Atonia sending one of her letters to a guardsman to the northeast, declaring her dominance over the Mount of Zygote and demanding stately recognition by both Sarracennia and Kyo itself. This was a daring plan, considering that Sarracennia had already given Atonia and Telios permission to govern Mount Zygote as an independent state, effectively taking a side militarily in any future conflicts Kyo would have with the matter. Though they liked the basic skeleton of this plan, Eus and Dumort were cautious to experience any response at all by the Kyo Inquisition. They wondered if the expediency of Wister Elidius' Inquisition could be earned if Eusatonia and Telios, alongside a group of coinciding Fulgen and Keeley citizens and occupying Sarracennian knights, fully inhabited the Mount of Zygote as if they had lived their entire lives on the wonderful landscape. Most daring of all, Eus and Telios would declare Mount Zygote as a free and independent state for all willing to live placidly in a helping community. Dumort of Ericales and Eusatonia loved this plan of action, and quickly got everyone on board to design a quaint and perfect little town on the eastern-facing hillside of Mount Zygote. They picked a spot near a recent rock slide. Dumort ordered a full construction site to be built, and within weeks the Knights of Sarracennia had outdone themselves in their architectural pursuit by building an ivy stronghold grown around solid iron framework, utilizing grow construction within the fortress's walls for inner insulation for sleep and comfortability. The stronghold became home to 400 moths and their riders, in addition to the 600 citizens that occupied the houses and filled the nearby fields and mountainsides of Fort Telios, as the stronghold came to be known. Within a month, the Mount of Zygote had become an entirely new place, almost utopian in its scale and implementation. Years after these events, a painter named Locke would say that during these initial parties within the Fort of Telios that, and I quote, "Never could joy and harmony be found before, after, or anywhere in the world since those days upon the Mount of Peace." End quote.